Welcome to Season 5 of She Ventures. I am your host, Doria Lavanino. She Ventures is a podcast about women and their work and life pivots. I believe in the power of storytelling. I also believe that if you change one woman's life, you start to change a family or a community. Our mission is to elevate the diverse stories of everyday women in their work. One promise, no mansplaining ever. Sit back, listen, and hit subscribe. We'd love to hear from you. You can find us at sheventurespodcast.com. She has nearly 2 decades of experience in brand strategy, communications, marketing, public relations, promotions, sales, and strategic partnerships. She is also the principal of Sect, a tactical solutions agency that serves as a catalyst for pioneering ideas, collaboration, and creative opportunities to promote relevant conversations that result in measurable social impact. Read Walk the Walk. During the pandemic, she started a fresh cut flower delivery business called Postal Petals. Here to talk about her pivots and her dedication to creating social change is Talia Boone. Talia, welcome to She Ventures.
Thank you so much, Doria. Really appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Oh, I am really excited to talk to you. So one of the overarching themes in your work and in your life is your commitment to creating social change. And I wondered when or how this activism was awakened in you.
I would have to be honest and say that I know it's always been there. It's something that my dad instilled in me very early on, was just this idea of my dad and his mom, actually, just this idea of everyone needs somebody. And that if you have enough for yourself, don't be afraid and be active and intentional about giving access to other people to help them whenever you can. And so I've always been the type to just, when I see a need, do what I can to fill it. It's always been there. And I began to see it materialize into action really once I got into college and started my career. And it just kind of was one of those things that just came naturally, and I gravitated towards it and really appreciated the opportunity to just meet people from different walks of life and to become more culturally fluid, if you will, in understanding the issues that exist outside of my experience and my upbringing.
Would you say that you found your voice in college, or was that voice always developing?
I think that voice was always developing. You know, back to my dad, I was raised to feel like and to be made to believe that my voice had power, that what I had to say was important, and that you choose your words carefully, and words are power, action is power, and the position that you have in the world is power. And so I've always felt the weight of my voice and always felt the weight of what I could bring to the world. I never doubted myself, if that makes sense. But I think I started to figure out, almost like a puppy learning to walk or a baby learning to walk, you're one step at a time. You're a little wobbly at first until you kind of get the hang of it. Right.
Yes,
and then, and what happened was the more I started to kind of be out in the world, the more I met people, the more I started to understand experiences other than my own, needs that I didn't experience as a youth, and kind of really starting to get to know people, their circumstances, how they came to be in these circumstances. I think that's, to be honest, where a lot of the strength came from and the knowledge came from. It's really just good old fashioned getting to know people and empathy, really just empathy.
Empathy, I think, is so important these days and can't be overstated. I watched, as I was telling you before we went live, the video on your site, Intersect. It was incredibly powerful, and it was played at Cannes, the film festival. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was played live there to promote conversations. And it was about systemic racism in our society and brands and how they position themselves or lack, actually, the ability to walk the walk, so to speak. How did that all come to fruition?
And thank you for bringing that up. So that was a piece that we produced actually for Cannes Lions, which happens in
Oh,
Cannes, France, which is the same place where the film
okay.
festival is. But Cannes Lions is kind of a bringing together of global brands, global marketing agencies, global ad agencies, really like the Nikes of the world, the Unilevers of the world, really massive global brands and their marketing and advertising agencies of record, and bringing them together really to kind of celebrate what went on in the space of brand marketing and advertising the year prior, and what were the trends coming in the year to come. Because I've been doing work in brand strategy, partnerships, sports, entertainment, all these different spaces for many, many years, I was very, very familiar in these worlds. And a lot of what we do with Intersect is really working at that intersection of sports and entertainment, corporate and consumer brands, and social impact. And what that means is that we work very hard to mobilize the resources of corporate and consumer brands. We pair them with the social equity of sports and entertainment assets for the purpose of measurable, tangible social impact. And what that's rooted in is really just the data research that shows that today's consumer, more than they care about a product or service that a brand provides, they care that the brand is socially and culturally aligned with the issues that are important to them. I had been communicating with Ken Lyon for a couple of years about doing a session of this magnitude, and kind of relating to this type of topic. And it just so happened that, the stars unfortunately aligned in 2020, during the pandemic, because typically because it's a global festival, because it is something that has to appeal to the entire world, they are careful about focusing on issues that they feel like just are relevant to one country, one culture, one people. What happened for us in 2020 is that, one, because of the pandemic, Cannes Lion it was supposed to be, obviously it's an in-person week-long festival at the end of June. They had to move that festival to a virtual
Virtual.
festival instead.
Okay.
But also what happened that created a really perfect opportunity and stage for us to have some of these important conversations was the unfortunate murder of George Floyd and the civil unrest, what they call the racial reckoning that happened around that time. Because what it did was it took a lot of the fight that we were having here in the US and truly made it a global issue, right? You started to see people in cities and countries all around the world protesting in solidarity with Black lives in the United States. And so what that did was it instantly took some of the issues that had been talking to Cannes Lion about, really wanting to make sure that we're bringing to the forefront at these festivals, right? Because this is where the brands are really identifying where they're meant to spend their money, where ad agencies and marketing agencies are meant to spend their messaging resources and those kinds of things. And so it just kind of worked out that what was going on here in the U.S. was happening on a global scale. The eyes of the world were on us.
You recognized the opportunity, though.
Absolutely, absolutely. And they came back and said, "Hey, let's try to make this happen." And we pulled that together in a very, very short amount of time. And it ended up being one of the most watched sessions of that entire festival. And it was really, really powerful because we just had a very honest and raw conversation about what it means to be not just Black in this country, but also what the corporate responsibility is, right? Because you would see so much of that time, you saw so many corporations raising their corporate fists in solidarity with Black lives. And a lot of what the conversation centered around was, hey, we appreciate that you are supporting us in this moment, but we need to figure out ways to make sure that we are holding you accountable, to make sure that the things that you're saying that you're going to do 6 months down the line, a year down the line, 2 years down the line, that we can come back and see that you have been what we call a good corporate citizen, and that you have really done what you could to make sure to equalize the playing field for not just Black lives, but marginalized lives across the country and around the world.
It is an incredible video, and I really recommend anyone who's listening to this podcast to watch it. What I took away from it, other than I think raw is a really good word for the conversation, I took away there were 3 at the end steps that I think really people or corporations can take. The first one was make a pact to act in a manner that requires you to own your responsibility to advance social justice. I know you know these because I think it was your voice.
Yeah.
2, identify measurable milestones, which is so important. And then 3, hold yourself accountable to achieve those milestones. So with that backdrop, how would you say, and I do remember, by the way, all of the Instagram Black Lives Matters, but it feels a bit like lazy activism in certain
Yes.
ways. So how do you, yes, performative, that's a great way to describe it. How do you think we are doing in 2022, 2023?
If I'm being completely honest, we are not doing nearly as well as we would be if all of those brands that stood up and said that they were going to do all of these magnificent things, allocate all of these large amounts of resources, had all of those things been done in the way that it was presented during that time, I think we would be quite a bit further. But when we start to go back and look at the reporting for how resources are spent, how dollars are allocated, and how they met up against the commitments that they made, unfortunately, quite a few brands have fallen short. But then at the same time, there's also quite a few that have really stood up to the challenge and stepped up to the plate. Hopefully, the audience will get a chance to see the video itself and kind of hear the conversation. But the video featured, it was a conversation between Ben Crump, who was the attorney for George Floyd's family, but also he's a civil rights attorney in this country in general. He helps a number of different families who have experienced similar circumstances. But then it also featured Malcolm Jenkins, who is the head of the NFL Players Coalition. And then also Jabari Jenkins, who works with Ben and Jerry's. And I'll tell anyone who will listen to me that Ben and Jerry's is my number one brand crush when it comes to unapologetic corporate activism. They are doing things that have absolutely nothing to do with their bottom line, right? They're talking about anti-recidivism. They're talking about reparations. They're talking about legalizing cannabis and releasing people from prison who were convicted of nonviolent drug offenses. And so you're looking at brands like that and really seeing that they have been very effective in that way. And so without calling out the brands that have not, I don't think this is the forum for that. But I think that if a lot of different operations really looked at the model of what Ben and Jerry's is doing, you'll see that they are wildly successful. And I think that it's not just because they have delicious ice cream. I think it's because they have captured the ethos of what their audience wants to see, what their audience believes is important, what their customer base believes in. And
Yes.
they've done an incredible job of that in a way that I'm very, very impressed with.
They really have. And they have been that way since they came on the market. It's not as though they did it because they thought it was trendy to do it. This is really, like, to your point, to the roots of what the company is about. Are there any other companies that you want to call out in a positive way?
I know Unilever has, which is now, I believe, the parent company of Ben and Jerry's, so that fits. But Unilever has made a full commitment to addressing issues of social injustice and issues of like environmental justice and those kind of things. So basically saying that every company under their umbrella has to have an active and measurable campaign initiative and focus for uplifting the communities in which they serve. And I've seen them be very effective in that way as well. Also, another one that is doing some really interesting work in a way that I really like is JP Morgan Chase. They have an initiative called Advancing Black Pathways. And, it's interesting because I've done this work for so long. I have seen so much performative activism. I've seen so much kind of like hollow promises where they are initiatives that really don't do much. It's really just a glorified marketing campaign, a marketing initiative. What I really love about what JP Morgan is doing is that they are actually really doing the work, really finding ways to deploy resources, not just mentorship, but also monetary resources to help advance Black business owners, to increase and encourage, financial literacy in marginalized communities, to fund, community programs that will uplift and give opportunities to youth in marginalized communities. And I've seen a lot of really incredible impact come from the work that they've done. And from what I can tell, based on what they've done so far, it's been really impactful. And so I'm also really impressed with what they're doing. Really, really impressed with them.
It's good to hear that some big brands are doing things to make a difference, because when we talk about recent data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, I'm not talking about women, but just people of color in general, 12% of them are in management positions. And it's interesting if you're in the media and you look at headlines, they can be so misleading because, it'll say record number of women in Fortune 500 CEOs, record number of Black CEOs. Yeah, okay, but there are 6.
Yeah, exactly. But there's 2. So what about it?
Yeah, exactly. And there is, what I watched really made me aware of this idea of corporate giving and how it can be very hollow, as you said. So what can decision makers do to continue to level the playing field? What can people do? What can I do? What can my audience do?
What I would say for corporations to do is to make sure that their leadership, their executive team, that their staff all look like the audiences that they're serving, look like the customers that they're serving. Because to your point exactly, this idea of there's record number of Black women, but there's only 6, so that's not impressive. If you see that the makeup of this country is 30% Black, 10% Latino, you need to look at what the makeup is and make sure that your company at least mirrors the makeup, not just even of your consumer base, but of the country. And making sure that that representation is there, really, because representation is key, right? Because
Yes.
Without representation, you honestly can't have a fully well-rounded product, right? I think about, it seems like a really small thing, but I think about this every time I travel or if I'm at, a hotel or in a restaurant bathroom where they have the sensors that make the water come on when it senses your movement under there. And what a lot of people don't realize is that those sensors are created for lighter skinned hands. If your hands, they don't pick up the same way for people with more melanated skin as they do for more fair skinned people. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that because they don't really have to realize it. It's these things of this idea of what the default is that needs to change, right? I remember maybe about a year or so ago, I think it was a Black medical student created that pregnancy. I forget the name of it. Please forgive me, but it's like a pregnancy photo where it shows the baby in utero and it shows the stages of growth. And he created that picture, but with Black woman and a Black baby in utero. And it was so incredibly impactful because we didn't even realize that we didn't see ourselves in these images. And it's the small things like that where we have been othered for so long and we have been the default ignored for so long. I know people don't necessarily see it as a default ignored, but when the default is whiteness and not brownness or Blackness, that you have to think about what that does to your psyche, what that does to you, even subliminally, the things that you might not even realize that it's doing to you, right? Because I always say, you can't be what you don't see. And there has been such a consistent world that we've lived in, particularly me as a Black woman, where we are not seen in the representation of the things, even the things that we utilize, right? And that's one thing that I really appreciate. Again, going back to my upbringing, that my mom was always really intentional about, was making sure that we had dolls that looked like us. She would search high and low to make sure that she found brown skinned dolls for my sister and I.
Right, which are prevalent now, right? But they
Prevalent
weren't.
now, but not when I was a kid.
Yes.
Not when I was a kid. It was very hard to find that. And so things like that representation, and I think that representation, me bringing up the dolls and me bringing up the water sensors, that is because the people at the top who are making the decisions, and I don't think that it's malicious, but you don't think about what you never forced to think about, right? And to have people in the room who have a different experience, who have a different outlook on the product that you're pushing out into the world and the way you're doing it, will allow you to better serve your consumer, will allow you to better serve your end user, because we are in a world that is not default white anymore. We are such an incredibly culturally diverse, ethnically diverse people, not just in this country, but globally. And if they had people at the top who represented the people that they're serving, I think you would see quite a bit of difference. And then to your question of what can we do as consumers, demand it. Demand it of the businesses that you patronize. Demand it of the companies that you use for all of your services, insurance, financing, where you're buying your clothing from, your food, all of these things. Demand it. I always talk to my friends about, it's particularly like my friends' kids, about getting on like a Robinhood and making sure that you're investing in the companies buying stock in the companies that you love and use. Well, the other side of that is you can buy that stock, but then also become an active shareholder. You don't have to be 20, 30, 50% shareholder in a company to have a voice. If you own one little stock or a portion thereof, you're an investor and you have a voice. And I talk to people so much about how activism in that way is so important, that you should make your voice heard and make sure that you are, if there's something that you want to see or there's inequities that you are noticing, speak up. Speak up.
It's so true what you're saying. And a light bulb went off for me when you were talking about knowing your customer. And that is something that is advantageous to the brand. That shouldn't be a hard sell, because it means then that you're going to appeal to more people in addition to the racial aspect of it and just being more inclusive, right? It seems almost like a no-brainer. Before we pivot to your entrepreneurship, I wanted to ask you, because you brought it up briefly, how you experienced corporate America, because we just glossed over like your 20-year career before you became an entrepreneur as a woman of color.
Interestingly enough, because I started in the sports industry. I worked in the NFL for years when I first started, and then kind of branched out into other sports and then into entertainment. And interestingly enough, I think that I, to be completely honest, had a much easier path than a lot of people on the corporate side, particularly because I had access to an asset that they all themselves wanted access to. And so I was able to get a lot of things done, but because it was being done in a space where it would kind of serve everybody, because, sports and entertainment, the social equity there is so significant. I will say, though, that some things that I did notice was I was oftentimes the only woman in the room, many times, even though in sports, there's particularly in NFL and NBA, it's majority Black players. I was often, particularly because these are executive level meetings, often one of the only Black people in a room. And I would oftentimes, and I've heard other colleagues of mine talk about this experience in a similar way, oftentimes have to defend my experience as a Black person, meaning that I could say, oh, I think this messaging or this type of initiative will resonate more with this particular community that you're trying to reach. And that community could maybe a Black community, maybe a Latino community, maybe a community of young women. I'm speaking from a position of authority just based on experience. And I would be told by white counterparts, oftentimes white male counterparts, that experience doesn't ring true to them. And so we should adjust the campaign or the initiative, which I find to be fascinating, because how is it that someone who has not lived that experience or been in close relationship with people who do say to you that what you're telling them is the experience doesn't ring true? But what that says really is that what we say as what we understand to be our lived experience does not match up with their perceived experience and their, kind of like limited experience that they would put on us. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but
no,
that
you
was
are.
my
You
experience.
are. And the other thing I'm thinking of, I was just kind of trying to envision, and it's not hard for me to envision because I've been through similar situations as a woman, but not a woman of color. I envision the white male standard, right, which everything seems to be, that's like accepted and is slowly changing. And I could easily see how someone might say, well, show us the data that whatever. If you've never done it before, right? Because a brand is not willing to be forward thinking other than Ben & Jerry's and Unilever. And yes, there are more and more. It's even hard to come up with data to substantiate your position, which it's very difficult.
Yes, you're absolutely correct, which again takes me back to why it's so important to have leadership represent the community that you're serving. There needs to be at the executive level someone who is in the room, and don't make them the only person, right? Like, don't make it where this one Black woman or one Black man is responsible for defining what the Black experience is, because we are not a monolith, and there are so many different experiences, lived experiences within our culture. And so in the same way that you'll get a room with 10 executives and 8 or 9 of them are white men, their experience is going to be different. They're going to vary in the ways in which they think a campaign or initiative should move forward. So if that's the case for them, imagine what that would be for someone from the Black community or the Asian community or the Latin community, right? And so that's why I talk about how important it is to have the same balance in the boardroom, the same balance in the C-suite, the same balance in the executive wing and the leadership team that represents the audience that you're serving, because otherwise it's disingenuine and it's counterproductive.
And I don't think it's a pipeline problem. I've heard that argument before too. I just don't believe that. I just don't. So you transitioned from corporate America to entrepreneurship. And I also want to tell the audience that before we went live, Talia was in the dark. She had woken up at like 3:00 in the morning. So she is serious about her business. Postal Petals. You created it at the height of the pandemic, and she must be on the West Coast, and she was in flower markets getting cut flowers, I would imagine. Can you tell listeners where the idea came from and how it was to create a business during the pandemic?
Oh my gosh, Doria, I'm going to be honest, I still can't believe that I get to run this company. Like it's still so incredible to me to even comprehend what's happening with this company. But I'll tell you kind of the origin story and how the company ended up coming to be. So I actually started arranging flowers several years ago, and it started just as like a friend activity. I have a friend of mine. We vibe so well because we love just doing random things. We love always trying something that we haven't tried before, just doing something different. I hadn't arranged flowers before. She's like, oh, I think for our next hang, let's arrange flowers. So I was like, okay, cool, no problem. So we did that and I really enjoyed it. But I also very oddly found a sense of peace while doing it. Even separate from our first friend hang, I just kind of started arranging flowers more and more. I mean, I started to really lean on flower arranging as a way to kind of decompress, right? Because remember, Intersect is very much it's an agency. It's a for-profit company, but we are very much rooted in activism and social impact. And we focus on any matter of human and civil rights issues, which is, voter engagement, voter suppression, immigrant rights, LGBTQ rights, women's rights, all of these things. And what I always will say to people is that when you truly care about these issues, the closer you get to the mechanisms of power, you realize that the system is not at all broken, that it is actually functioning exactly the way that it's supposed to. And whenever you start to work and strategize around fixing those systems, you meet a significant amount of resistance along the way. That can be incredibly demoralizing to anyone who is really about trying to advance the work and, kind of bring about change. And so what I started to find was that when I would begin to get stressed out about this roadblock that I was experiencing or something else that was going on, I would just arrange flowers. I would go down to the flower market because, I live in LA, and I would go down to the flower market, kind of mill around and find the flowers that I thought would look really good together and go home and arrange them. And maybe I'd pour a glass of wine, maybe I'd put on some nice music. But that time that I would spend focusing on the flowers and not focusing on myself or my day or what obstacle I'm going up against, it just would just calm me in a way that I just really, really appreciated. And I came to look forward to it. It's funny because my therapist would joke. She was like, I wish all of my clients were like you. You have the most healthy coping mechanisms. Like
she would go out of business, though.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Right. Because that's where I would find my peace. But so fast forward to the pandemic, about mid to late April. So here in LA, we went on lockdown like the second or third week of March. And it was only meant to be like 2 or 3 weeks in the house. They were going to get this thing under control. And then we were going to all get to go back to our regular lives. No big deal. Well, by the end of April, we had been locked up for 5 weeks, maybe even 6 weeks at that point. And it was becoming very clear that this was not meant to be a temporary situation, that this was something that they did not know what was happening, that I had no idea what was happening, and that there was a lot of uncertainty, right? And it started to really just breed a lot of anxiety for me, where I was like, what does this mean for my family? What does this mean for my company, my life, the people I saw, all of these things. And I just kind of started sort of like freaking out, like the walls in the house were closing in on me. And It was actually my therapist who said, I haven't heard you talk about arranging flowers in a while. Why don't you give that a try and let's see if that works? And I was like, that's a great idea. I thought, okay, I'll go get me some flowers. Well, the problem was that the LA flower market, remember, that's where I would usually go to get my flowers. They were closed down because of the pandemic and the shutdowns. That then sent me kind of on a search online. So I'm thinking, oh, at this point, you can get everything delivered. So I thought, oh, I'll look for a company that can ship me a box of fresh cut flowers, and I can arrange them myself, and it's perfect. Well, I looked and I could not find a company that did what I was looking for, which again was just to ship me bundles of flowers, cut flowers that I could break apart and arrange on my own. And in that search, I ended up stumbling upon this wholesale flower distributor who shipped large volumes of flowers to his retail clients all around the world. And I called him really just with the audacity to see if I could convince him to reduce his global minimums to just enough for me to have flowers to arrange at home. I just cold called him one day, and he very quickly told me no, that was not possible. But he was so kind and gracious in his no that he and I ended up on the phone for about 2.5 hours. And in the process of that conversation, I learned about why they couldn't do it and what was actually happening with the flower farms and the floral industry because of the pandemic, things that when it's not your industry, you don't pay attention to it, right? And I go back to what we were talking about very early on is that your worldview changes the more people you talk to, the more you open yourself up to other people's experiences. He just shared with me about how because events had been canceled, weddings had been canceled, a lot of the large orders that farms were depending on had all kind of dissipated, and that many flower farmers were now desperate to find new ways to get their product to market, and they were suffering. They were laying people off, and they were very uncertain about how they were going to be able to sustain. It was that conversation that by the end of that conversation, I realized two things. One, that what I was looking for did not currently exist in the marketplace the way in which I was looking for it. And then two, I saw an opportunity to, one, not just enter an industry that typically had like a gatekeeper culture, because the pandemic essentially became like the great equalizer. And so I was able to enter this industry that it may have been more difficult for me to enter into were it not for the pandemic. But then also I saw an opportunity to support domestic flower farmers by helping them find new ways to bring their product to market. As he and I are on the call, my mind is spinning. My mind works really, really fast. I always tell people I add quickly. And so by the time we got off the phone, I said to him, like, hey, do you think something like this could work? And I pitched to him a rough version of what is now Postal Petals. And he kind of sat for a minute and he thought, and then he said, if you would have asked me this 4 months ago, I would have said, no way, there's no way that could work. He said, but now actually that something like that could work. That was the week before Mother's Day of 2020. And I immediately went to work building a wireframe, sketching out what the company could look like. And by July of that year, we launched Postal Petals in beta with nearly 20 farm partners signed up to ship for us. We were in beta for 6 to 8 weeks. Then we launched fully in September of 2020. The way I describe us is we partner with domestic flower farms to ship bundles of fresh cut flowers to our customers nationwide for them to create their own do-it-yourself flower arrangements as a way to express themselves creatively, but also as a way to practice self-care and mindfulness and as a meditative practice. And it's been really great. I mean, it started as direct to consumer. Now we got a really strong presence in the corporate space. So we've got a B2B audience that's continuing to grow. We're building out a whole wellness component, wellness curriculum. So to your point where you talk about the therapist, my therapist risking being run out of business with the flowers, we're actually now working with mental health practitioners and mental health providers to build out curriculums whereby the flowers are being used specifically for relief of anxiety, for stress relief, to practice mindfulness and kind of allowing yourself to have a healthy escape and a healthy release of tensions and anxiety. So it's been really, really beautiful. Every day I wake up so grateful to be able to build a company that was an outlet for stress and anxiety for me. And the idea that I am getting the same emotional benefits from building this company that I was from just arranging flowers is just a gift that I can't stop being grateful for. Like it's amazing. And I can be so much more creative in so many different ways and really cool collaborations, and we do workshops, we do community wellness events. And so
Oh,
we're also beginning to really deploy our flowers into the community and using them as a way to introduce mindfulness, introduce wellness and self-care to communities all around LA. And it's a really, really beautiful evolution of this company. And I'm excited for a lot of the things that are coming down the pike. And I'm just so truly honored. I that's the only way I can say it, is I just feel like honored to be chosen as a steward, because this vision could not have been my own. There's no way I would have ever thought that I'd have a flower company. And really, I say a flower company, but I really consider us to be more of like an immersive self-care and wellness company that uses fresh cut flowers as a tool for mindfulness, that uses DIY flower arranging as a creative expression for stress relief. So
corporations are beginning to partner with you, and this would be a wellness offering?
yes. So we have 3 to 4 main corporate offerings. We do our workshops, either virtual workshops or in person, kind of depends on what the current operating structure is of the corporation, but we'll do the workshops as part of their employee team building activities. We'll do it as part of their corporate health and wellness. And with those, usually we'll integrate meditation, sometimes like a gentle yoga, breath work, that kind of thing. We have a shelf stable product in our gift kits. We offer them for sale to our consumers, but to our corporate partners, we actually are able to customize those gift kits so that they are now customizable offerings. And those gift kits include one of our floral design toolkits, which is like an apron and garden shears and floral tape and all the things that you need to arrange your flowers once they come. But then it also comes with voucher that is redeemable for one of our 3 box sizes, so that the recipient, when they get their gift, they get the kit with all the things that they need, and then
Oh,
instructions on how to then go onto the website, select the flowers they want to receive, tell us when they want to receive them, and then we ship those out. So that really falls more into like corporate gifting, employee gifting, client gifting, like with real estate companies would be like a closing gift or something like that. And then we also do immersive floral art installations and activations. So like we were at the LA3C Music Festival here in LA over the weekend and did like an immersive activation where we built out a floral installation and then let people like try on flower crowns and, engage with the flowers really more directly. Because, I say that a lot of what we're doing is really evolving people's relationship with flowers from a ready to use product to an interactive wellness experience. And so we're just finding so many different ways and in creative ways to encourage people to really take a look at how they've been using flowers and say, hey, we've been using flowers all wrong. Like we had no idea they could be a tool
right?
in this way.
Yeah, this is incredible. It's opening my mind in so many ways listening to you. What would you say is the most difficult and the most rewarding part of starting your business?
The most difficult part, to be honest, learning a new industry. Although I've built brands before, I'm a great strategist. I know how to build brands. This is an industry that I had never touched before, because even during the times when I was just flower arranging on my own, I never knew the names of flowers. I just would see what looked good and I just grab them. There was very much a learning curve, which I'm one of those people who actually really enjoys learning and experiencing new things. While that was difficult, it was also really exciting for me, because now to hear me talk, you think I've been with flowers all my life. It's, meeting the farmers and meeting, learning about the new flowers and meeting other florists, because we're not a floristry. And I say to people all the time, we are not a florist. We ship flowers for people to essentially become their own florist. But we do a lot of partnerships with florists, with local florists, not just here in LA, but all across the country. And we're always finding ways to support and collaborate with local florists. So I would say the hardest thing was learning the floral industry. And I think the other question was, what has been the most rewarding? Learning the floral industry. Because it's been so cool. Like there's so many ways that we can build the community, that we could serve the community, there's so much opportunity for creativity. Like, I don't know, it sounds odd to say, but I feel like I have found like my perfect retirement. Like,
Oh,
like
yeah.
I'm so happy working in this company, but I'm also so happy because I feel like more that I'm playing in the company. Like it's just, I am obsessed thinking about not just the recipes, but how can we, I've almost gamified it, if you will, in a way of like, how can we get more people engaging with flowers. How can we better tell the story of DIY flower arranging? Like, I love the idea that this is it's not just a new company, it's a new concept, right? And there's so much that goes into messaging and reaching your audience and figuring out the best message that resonates and what is the trigger that gets people to convert. All of those things, I find that to be fascinating. I'm kind of nerding out right now.
No,
Your audience
believe
is probably
me.
like, girl, this is nerdy.
No, marketing is so key, right? To entrepreneurship and knowing exactly, to your point, like what is the messaging that is going to reach someone so that they become interested.
Exactly that. And we're actually, as you mentioned earlier, I've been up since 3 this morning at the flower market. That's because we are in the process of doing like a major refresh on the website where we can better tell the story of what we do in a way that helps people more effectively understand what we do and how to engage with our product. So tomorrow we have a full day production shoot with like brand videos, new product images, all of these things. And so those things are fun for me because it's just the strategy of it all. Because this is the thing, Doria, is that for me, the win is effective communication, right? And that's the same for me, whether it's selling a product, whether it is figuring out what the needs of my community are, whether it's figuring out strategically, how can we turn out more voters in an area where voter suppression has been run rampant, like where all of it all goes back to this kind of like, I don't want to call it a game because a lot of these issues are very serious.
Of course.
But it's really figuring out how do you reach people where they are?
Yeah. Yes,
how
where
can
they're
you
at.
meeting them right where they're at? And there's something about that where I had a meeting with our branding team yesterday around messaging because they're scripting out or kind of roughing out some of the scripts for the brand videos. And that was so exciting for me. Just thinking about the language and how powerful words are and how one simple little word can change someone's entire perspective. And we came out of the session with one thing that I just loved because, it's like, how do we get people to be thinking about flowers and wellness? And someone on the call said, the message is really, have you filled your vase? Have you filled? And I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. And there's messaging around it, but it's really like thinking about the vase and putting the flowers in the vase as you pouring into your wellness.
It's a metaphor.
It's a perfect metaphor.
Yeah.
And then the beautiful thing about the flowers is when thinking about self-care, so many times we'll go for a massage, we'll go for a workout, we'll do these things. But what's really different about the flowers is that you then have a tangible physical reminder of that experience, right? And it kind of forces you, or at least reminds you of the importance of centering your wellness. And so this idea of messaging around that metaphor of, have you filled your vase? When's the last time you filled your vase? It's time to fill your vase. Like,
I love it.
I do too. And but that's the thing that gets me so geeked and gets me so excited.
Yeah.
It's just really finding like, how can we use language to help as many people as we can. And yeah, I'm just happy in here. Like,
you're getting me all. I'm like, I'm ready. I'm gonna fill my vase when.
I love that. I love hearing you say it because it sounds so right.
Yeah, it really does. Oh, it's great. So we're getting close to wrapping up. I wanted to ask you, what tips would you give to women of color who want to start a business?
First and foremost, just do it. Just start. There is no perfect time. There is no perfect answer. There is no perfect moment. There is no perfect way to do it. So much of my time with this company, and especially in the last 9 to 12 months, it's funny, I was just having this conversation earlier this week. So much of my first 2 years, and in particular the last, again, 9 to 12 months, has been just proofing concept, just showing that it can be done. It does not have to be perfect. But if you see the opportunity to start, just start. Just start, just make your first sale, pick the name, then go and pick all your social media handles, just one thing at a time, but just start. Because once you start the first step, then the second step, third step, fourth step, it gets easier and easier and easier. But you'll never be able to build what you can't even plan, what you don't even begin to engage with. So just start. Definitely start. The other piece of advice that I would give is to center your wellness. Make sure you take care of yourself. Entrepreneurship is very, very tough. Mm-hmm. It's very, very hard. And I say to people all the time, I don't ever want anyone to think that My friends call me like a chronic optimist, which is true. I'm optimistic about everything. I can't help it just because I think that's the best outlook to have on life. But I also have times when I get scared, where I get down, self-doubt will creep in. Those are the times when I need to give myself a moment to just feel however I'm feeling. Don't push it down. If you need to cry it out, but really center your wellness. Like, for example, I have been almost nonstop past 2+ years building this company. And I'm really excited because at the top of the year, I'm going away on like a 10-day silent meditation retreat. And
Oh,
that's my way of just really centering my wellness, centering
yes.
myself, going quiet, allowing me to just fall into myself, fully into myself without any distraction. And that's something that I had to kind of work myself up to doing, because you get so into your company and you feel like, oh, if I
It can't
leave, it'll fall
exist.
apart. They need
Yeah.
me, this, that, and the other, which is true. But the reality is that if you have a company that can't run, if you're not there, you don't have a company. And so you really
Thank
do
you.
have to find ways to prioritize your own emotional and mental health.
I love that. And the one thing that I would add that's helped me a lot is mentorship of other women. It's incredible. And in fact, I think on your website, you cite an African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, which is really touching and true. Where can listeners learn more about you and your company, Postal Petals?
We are at postalpetals.com. We are at Postal Petals across social media platforms. We kept the branding pretty consistent. So anywhere that you want to look for us, we're Postal Petals. So if you hear something in this interview and you have questions, shoot us a DM. If I don't get it directly, someone on the social team will get it and make sure that it gets to me. But yes, please look us up. Follow us on social media. We're on LinkedIn. We're on TikTok. We're on Instagram. But I'd love to hear from you guys. So please definitely message if you have questions, or just go online and order some flowers if you need some flowers and you're ready for an immersive floral experience.
If you want to fill your vase, like
You want to fill your vase. Yes, I
yes,
got to get
like
used
we
to saying
have.
that.
Thank you, Talia, so much for coming on She Ventures today.
Absolutely, Doria. Thank you so much for having me. I truly appreciate it.
You've been listening to She Ventures. Like what you heard? You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe and sign up for our newsletter so you never miss a show.